When soldiers posed for a group photo back in 1903, they never imagined that researchers would zoom in on their faces a century later. What these researchers discovered when examining the photograph shocked the historical community, changing our understanding of military photography. The heavy wooden door of the GMA History Museum creaked open as Maria Petrou rushed in, struggling with a large cardboard box. Rain dripped from her coat onto the polished floor as she set down her precious cargo. "I found it," she called out, her voice echoing through the quiet exhibition hall. The original Sex Regiment photograph had been in the basement archives all this time. The museum director hurried over, eyebrows raised in disbelief. For months, they had been preparing an exhibition dedicated to the Imperial Guard, but the centerpiece, a legendary photograph showing over 1,000 soldiers in perfect formation, had been missing. Now, on the morning before the exhibition's opening, Maria had miraculously uncovered it in an old storage room. With trembling hands, they carefully removed the photograph from its protective covering. Even after more than 100 years, the image was remarkably clear. 250 guardsmen arranged in 25 neat rows, each face distinct and recognizable despite the massive scale of the group. "This can't be real," the director whispered, adjusting his glasses. Cameras in 1903 weren't this advanced. Maria leaned closer, examining the faces of the soldiers. "Look at how sharp everything is. You can even see." She paused, squinting at the image's foreground. "Are those cigarette butts in the grass?" The director pulled out a magnifying glass from his desk drawer and confirmed Maria's observation. There, scattered among the blades of grass in front of the first row of soldiers, were tiny cigarette butts, perfectly captured by a camera that, by all historical accounts, shouldn't have been capable of such fine detail. "We need to get this digitized immediately," the director said, already reaching for his phone. "There's something extraordinary about this photograph." Little did they know that this discovery would set in motion a research project that would shock historians and photography experts around the world. The soldiers who had posed for this group photo in 1903 had left behind a mystery that would only be unraveled a century later. 3 days later, the museum's small digitization lab was busy. Alexei, a young scanning technician, had been working non-stop to scan the massive old photograph. The negative was huge, 110 by 60 centimeters, much bigger than most early 20th century photos. "This is unbelievable," Alex said, pointing to his computer screen where he had zoomed in on a section of the image. "I can see individual buttons on their uniforms, the decorations, even the expressions on their faces. This kind of resolution shouldn't be possible with century-old technology." Maria nodded, equally amazed. "Can we know anything about how this photograph was taken?" "Only what's written on the back," Alexei replied, carefully turning over the original. "It says it was taken in 1903, showing the full strength of the Sexhall Lifeguards Regiment. The negative size is noted, but there's no information about the camera or the photographer." News of the remarkable photograph spread beyond the museum. Within weeks, researchers from Moscow, Berlin, and London arrived, eager to study it. Dr. Andrei Vulov, a leading expert in historical photography from Moscow University, led the team. As he examined the image, he frowned. "You see why this is strange, right?" he asked Maria. In 1903, cameras were not advanced. Most glass plate negatives were small, and lenses weren't sharp enough to capture such a large group with this much detail. It should have been impossible. Yet the evidence was right before their eyes. As the team set up their high-powered digital equipment to examine every inch of the photograph, their skepticism turned to excitement. Not only was every face clearly visible, but they could also see every detail that should have been lost to the limitations of early 20th century photography. "Look at this soldier here," said Dr. Emma Richardson, the imaging expert from London. She pointed to a man in the middle row, whose cheeks appeared slightly puffed out. "It's almost as if he's holding his breath." The mystery deepened when an elderly visitor to the museum recognized that soldier Victor Magini, a 78-year-old local resident, had come to see the exhibition after reading about it in the newspaper. When he saw the famous photograph, he immediately asked to speak with the researchers. "My grandfather is in that picture," he told them, his eyes bright with excitement. His name was Fedos Karatsky. "He used to tell me stories about the day this photograph was taken." The research team gathered around Victor, eager to hear first-hand accounts that might solve the mystery of the impossible photograph. "According to my grandfather," Victor began, "this photograph was taken on the occasion of the regiment commander's retirement. They spent a whole day preparing for the photography. My grandfather even lit a cigarette while standing on the scaffolding. And when the command sounded, he held the cigarette in his fist but didn't have time to release the smoke. That's why his cheeks are puffed out in the photograph." Dr. Vulov looked back at the image on the screen, zooming in on Fedos Karatsky's face. The story matched perfectly with what they were seeing, a young soldier with his cheeks noticeably puffed out as if holding his breath. "Did your grandfather ever mention the camera they used?" Dr. Richardson asked. Victor thought for a moment, his wrinkled face scrunching in concentration. "He said they built tall scaffolding for the photographer. The camera was enormous. He described it as being as big as a small car with a lens like a dinner plate." This new information excited the research team. A camera with such a large lens in 1903 would have been a major breakthrough. "There's more," Victor added. "My grandfather mentioned that they spent hours positioning every soldier. The photographer was incredibly particular, obsessing over every detail. Some of the men joked that he was more strict than their commanding officers." As the researchers continued their investigation, they made another startling discovery. When examining the background of the photograph beyond the rows of soldiers, they noticed what appeared to be surveying equipment. "This is interesting," Dr. Vulov murmured, enhancing the image further. "Why would there be surveying equipment at a regimental photograph?" The question led them down a new path of inquiry. Searching through historical archives, they uncovered scattered references to a secret optical research division within the Imperial Russian military, one that had been developing advanced photography equipment for reconnaissance purposes. "What if the regimental photograph was a cover?" suggested Dr. Heinrich Meyer, the historian from Berlin. "What if the real purpose was to test new military technology for aerial reconnaissance?" The theory gained credibility when they found a brief mention in a military journal from 1904 of experimental optical equipment being field tested at the Kexholm Regiment headquarters. The journal entry was vague, but it aligned perfectly with the timing of the photograph. Meanwhile, Maria had become fascinated with the soldiers themselves. Using the incredible detail of the photograph, she began identifying individual soldiers and tracing their life stories through military records. The Kexholm Lifeguards Regiment had a distinguished history. According to the caption, which they found beneath a copy of the photo in another museum, the Lifeguards Regiment of the Austrian Emperor was founded in 1710 by Emperor Peter I. Since its founding, the regiment had participated in 20 wars, spent 50 of them, and visited Sweden, Persia, Turkey, Germany, Denmark, England, Portugal, Greece, Austria, Switzerland, Romania, and Bulgaria. The caption continued listing the regiment's many honors: 2 silver trumpets for the capture of Germany in 1760, the grenadier rank for distinction in 1812, insignia on caps for distinction for the battle at Mountains Airy in 1814, double buttonholes on uniforms in 1815, transferred to the Guards Corps in 1831, ribbons on banners for 100 years of service in 1838, for St. George banners for the war in 1878, named Lifeguards, and St. Andrew's stars on hats in 1894. Victor's help. Maria located the descendants of several other soldiers in the photograph. Each family had their own stories passed down through generations about the day the entire regiment posed together. One family shared letters from their great-grandfather describing how the photographer had spent hours arranging the regiment, demanding absolute stillness for the perfect shot. Another brought in a pocket watch their ancestor had received as a gift that day, visible in his hand in the photograph when they zoomed in close enough. The most touching story came from an elderly woman named Anastasia, who recognized her grandfather in the front row. "He always said it was the proudest day of his life," she told Maria, tears welling in her eyes. Not because of the photograph, but because it was the day he. The photo of a soldier, once considered just an ordinary image, became the center of attention when zooming in on her grandfather's uniform revealed a freshly pinned medal that hadn't yet appeared in the regiment's official records. This discovery added to the photograph's historical significance. As news spread, the GMO Museum saw an unexpected influx of visitors, some traveling from far beyond the country to view the photo and learn about the soldiers who posed together over a century ago. Months into their research, the team began to focus on the previously overlooked edges of the photograph. In one corner, partly hidden by a tent flap, they found something that challenged their understanding of early 1900s technology. Upon closer inspection, they saw what appeared to be a second, unusually advanced camera for its time. It featured a massive lens about a meter wide and a detailed framework allowing for precise adjustments. "This could explain everything," Dr. Richardson whispered as she stared at the screen. "A lens of that size, if properly crafted, could indeed capture such fine detail." Dr. Volov nodded slowly, remarking that such technology wasn't supposed to exist in 1903. The camera appeared decades ahead of its time. This discovery intrigued photography historians and experts. How could such an advanced camera have been built in 1903, and why was it never documented in history? Further research led them to Nikolai Verv, a Russian optical engineer who, in the early 1900s, designed cutting-edge lenses for the military. His work was considered revolutionary, though most was lost during the Russian Revolution. It seemed the Kexholm Regiment photograph was not just a commemoration, as initially thought. Instead, it was a demonstration of cutting-edge military technology, a camera with a lens nearly 1 meter in diameter, capable of providing invaluable reconnaissance details. The theory was further supported when the team discovered that the photograph had been taken just months before the Russo-Japanese War broke out. The Russian military likely needed advanced reconnaissance technology, and using a regiment photo as a cover was a clever way to test it. "What's truly remarkable," Dr. Richardson noted, "is that this technology was so advanced, it wouldn't become standard in photography for decades." The Russian Revolution and subsequent wars must have destroyed the research facility and scattered its innovations. For Maria, however, the human side of the story was just as significant. The photograph's level of detail allowed her to identify more than 200 soldiers and connect their descendants with images of their ancestors for the first time. "This photograph is a bridge through time," she told a journalist. "It's not just a historical artifact. It's a way for people to connect with their family history." The most emotional moment came when Victor brought his entire family to the museum to see his grandfather's face, clear and detailed, frozen in that moment with his cheeks puffed full of cigarette smoke. For generations of the family stood before the photograph, marveling at the connection across time. "He would have never believed this," Victor said, his voice thick with emotion, that over 100 years later, his great-great-grandchildren would be looking at his face, seeing him exactly as he was on that day. The researchers also discovered another similar photograph in the Rivne Museum's collections, showing the lifeguards of St. Petersburg from King Frederick William III Regiment. Taken in the same location as the famous Kexholm Regiment photograph, this discovery suggested that the advanced camera had been used multiple times, supporting the theory that it was part of a deliberate military technology development program. The Rivne photograph, measuring 44 by 98 centimeters, showed the same extraordinary level of detail. After scanning it at a resolution of 800 dpi, cigarette butts were clearly visible in the grass, just like in the Kexholm Regiment photograph. Rumors spread that the camera still existed and was preserved in a military museum in Russia. The team even found a blurry old photograph of what might have been the mysterious camera, though they couldn't confirm if it was real. As the researchers published their findings in major academic journals, the Kexholm Regiment photograph became world famous. People began calling it the impossible photograph, a forgotten piece of history rediscovered when researchers zoomed in and saw something no one expected. The GMO Museum was forever transformed by the discovery, becoming a globally recognized institution.